Hi, this is Liz Hirsh Naftali, and welcome to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. And while we're not in person, I am having a virtual coffee today with Senator Mazie Hirono from the great state of Hawaii. I had said to her a little earlier, thank you. What do you have? You have some coffee and a beautiful mug.
I like coffee, and this is a wonderful, colorful coffee cup with hibiscus. Reminds me of Hawaii.
I love it. I love it. Well, one day we're going to be in person, but for now, I want to say thank you. You know, you have a remarkable story. People look at you and they just think, oh, she's a senator. But my goal on this podcast is to say, like, you're a person, a real person with a beautiful and an interesting and a story that had darkness, but has a lot of light in it. And for me, this is an opportunity for us to, get to know who you are in a short period of time. And, I was thinking about this. You were born in Fukushima, Japan, and you were raised on your grandparents' rice farm. And then you come to America with your mom, who's a single woman with 2 kids and I know leaving a child behind. And then the story of your mom and what she did for you all coming to America. And now fast forward, and after years of serving in the state legislature in Hawaii, and then now a U.S. senator, I just think that is like really important for people to understand. I mean, you're a first female senator from Hawaii. You're the first Asian American woman to be elected to Senate, and you're the first U.S. senator to be born in Japan. So there's a lot of firsts, but I always say, you will be the first, but you shall not be the last. And we know in some of these instances, other people have also joined you in the Senate.
Liz, I think you have a wonderful program because you're right that people see us. I have a title called senator, and people have all these notions, but we all have stories to tell. And my journey to the U.S. Senate is very unlikely that I would end up here, having been born and raised much of my time in a little village in Japan on my grandparents' rice farm. And who would have thunk it that I would end up here? But I owe to my mother, who had the courage to leave an abusive marriage, to my father, who I never got to know, and to bring us to this country so that we could have a better life. And to live that immigrant story that so many millions of immigrants in our country live, it's a story that I certainly relate to. And came here with nothing. I don't speak the language, all of that. Yeah. So, and now I get to be a senator. Who would have thunk it?
Exactly. And, I will say I've been listening to your book, Heart of Fire, An Immigrant Daughter's Story. And even after this, I hope that people will listen because they'll get a little taste of who you are. But then from that, they can go out and they can read it, or they can hear you say it and speak it. And it's really beautiful. So on that note, I'm going to ask you, there's one story, and I'd love for you as a way of introduction to talk about who you are, which is your dime story, being a little girl.
Yes.
And I would love if you could talk about that, because it talks about a lot of things, but in the end, it really, I think, represents about so much about your journey coming to America and who you are.
When I came to this country, as I said, my mother had tremendous courage to bring first 2 older kids, and my younger brother was left behind because he was too young to go to school, and there would be nobody to take care of him in this country. We have very little, but my mother would give us on occasion, me and my older brother, a dime, and she had bought the 2 of us a little tin baseball piggy bank that I loved, and I would put all my dimes there. I had this desire to save my money. But one day I came home, and every day I would take the little, tin piggy bank and shake it and be very happy that there would be all these dimes full of thinking in there. But one day I came home and there were no dimes left. And my mother came home and she said she had to use the dimes to buy food for us. And often we would run out of money by the end of the month, and our diet was really simple. But I remember when I was running for lieutenant governor, and the person who was running for governor told that story to an entire, we were having a rally, and there was hardly a dry eye in the house, but there were people there who came up to me and said that I had a hard time too. My family had a hard time. And so I think back to that time when we really had a hard time. But my mother, we just lost her about 2 years ago. An amazing person, but I understood that she needed the money. And I just started saving money again after she told me why she had to literally raid my piggy bank.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought that was also interesting, and it is about who you are, and I think it's a really interesting place for people to learn, is this concept of a picture bride. Your grandmother was a picture bride. And if you could just, for a second, not a second, but a moment, explain to people what a picture bride is. I think that's really important.
Hawaii basically had a plantation economy where there were very large sugar plantations and pineapple plantations, and especially for the sugar plantations, they imported labor from China, Japan, the Philippines. My grandfather immigrated to Hawaii to work on the plantation when he was only about 16. He did not have much education. Many of them would call for brides from their home country. And in Japan, they were called picture brides. And my grandmother was one of them. She had never met my grandfather. She came to this country, to Hawaii, as a picture bride. And so there's an entire story to the hardships that these women had. But this is the way that Japanese men were able to have families. And the plantations, I think, encouraged that so that they would have a more stable workforce. It was really hard on my grandmother, though. She said she would cry at how hard the work was. So that's a whole another part of the history of Hawaii, and the modern Hawaii came out of all of these sacrifices of these immigrants who came to Hawaii.
Tell us a little bit about, and there's a lot special about Hawaii, but for you, what are the things that are most special and about the people in your state?
I think that one of the biggest strengths for Hawaii is the diversity of the people in Hawaii, that we come from different cultures. And we're very aware and grateful for the Native Hawaiian culture, which underlies a lot of how we treat each other. We have this idea called ohana, which means that we care not just about our own immediate family, but our community. And so this kind of aloha and caring for others, it comes from the Native Hawaiian culture. But we have all of these waves of immigrants who came, who intermarried, who stayed, and who really created Hawaii and its multiculturalism. And that's what I love about Hawaii at a time when there are states where they're trying to get rid of diversity, equity, inclusion, where you can't hear the stories or read the stories of any of the minority cultures, places like Texas and Florida, where they're banning books. But Hawaii is not one of those places. And I'm grateful every day, as we live in such a sadly divided country, that I represent a state where we are happy to be in a culture where we eat each other's foods and appreciate the diversity. So I'm grateful that I represent a state like Hawaii.
Well, it's nice to hear that, because most people think of Hawaii, they just think of the beach. They think of a holiday. But when you talk about it from a place of like what it means to be a person who lives there and what life is like, I think it's important for people to know. And I hope that the idea of celebrating our individuality, but seeing what commonly brings us together, again, is why I'm having this podcast and why we're here speaking today.
Well, when President Kennedy came to Hawaii and he saw the diversity and the multiculturalism, he said, Hawaii is what the rest of the world should be like.
Nice.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about, you come to America around 8, you don't speak the language, you go to school, you barely have anything. I know that in the book you talked about the smell of the food. It wasn't what you were accustomed to. No, but I think that's an important piece, and you're learning the language and you're with others, and yet you are different because you have really not had an education in America. And then, but were there teachers, and I've asked people, leaders along, across the line, teacher or a story of something that you can share with the people that stays with you today, or a teacher that mentored you? Could be in elementary or in high school.
The one teacher that I stayed in touch with was my 6th grade elementary school teacher. And as an immigrant, we moved every 2 years. So I didn't have a continuity of friendship. We had no phone. We had no car. If we moved, I would lose touch with people. And so I didn't develop those kinds of friendships. We moved, I said, every 2 years. I went to quite a number of schools. But my 6th grade teacher, I stayed in touch with because he saw something in me that my other teachers did not. I know how important teachers are. And when you think back, how important it is for teachers to instill in us the idea that we can do something with our lives. I can't remember any teacher except my sixth grade teacher who even it put it into my brain that maybe I can do something with my life that was going to be different. And he passed away not too long ago. He got a PhD and a wonderful person. But my hope is that public school teachers in particular, most kids have to go to public schools, that their teachers encourage them not in a fake, phony way, but to encourage their students to understand that there's a big wide world out there and they can do more things. But it's not something that I particularly experienced in my life. And frankly, it was when I was at the university that during the Vietnam War that I began to see what our country was doing and to protest the war. But, I went to a high school where we had a graduating class of about 750. And there were very few of my classmates who questioned what our government was doing. If anything, they supported the Vietnam War, but I did not. And that was one of the experiences that I had that got me to think about doing something that was going to make a difference. And I began to become much more politically aware and active. And eventually that is what led me to politics. But it's not anything that I thought of before all of that.
Yeah. And what was the name of your sixth grade teacher?
His name is Yoshinobu Oshiro. He was one of the recipients of the Congressional Gold Medal. He was in the military intelligence service in Japan.
That's right.
Back in World War II.
Thank you for sharing that. You've been in public service your whole life from everything I can read. I mean, but what was your first job, like job? Because I know that you had to get a job to help pay for stuff. What was your first job?
Actually, my first job was delivering newspapers when I was in elementary school. And we found this castaway bike, and my older brother and I painted the bike. And so I delivered, get this, the Japanese language newspaper to the maids who worked in a very rich part of Oahu. It's kind of telling, isn't it?
Yeah.
That would be my first so-called job. I had a lot of different things that I did as I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. It took me a while to decide to go back to school. I was out of college for 5 years before I went back to school, deciding that I would get a law degree so I would be better prepared to deal with whatever else was coming my way. But I didn't have, as my older brother would say, I didn't have a real job until later in life. But again, my mother never said to me, when are you going to get a real job? When are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? She never once asked me those questions. She just kept supporting me in all the different things that I was doing. And her faith in me and her support is what enabled me to do what I do.
Yeah. And that's really what we want. I mean, I think there's this idea that parents want their children to have some sort of a trajectory. And for me, and I've learned with my raising my children that, for me, like they need to be productive in whatever they're passionate about and they can do, but their health mentally, physically is something that is the most important to me, especially after seeing COVID and so many life experiences that I've had. Like I wake up every day and I just say, I really want my children to be excited about what they do, be good people, but, make sure that they have the health to live life. And, your mom with everything at the end of the day, without even like this high education, she basically wanted to make sure her daughter was healthy, happy, feeling and doing good things. And that is a gift.
I think the biggest, one of the biggest gifts was that she literally changed my life, but also she did not push me in sort of what I call the usual kinds of directions. And so I did not get married until I was over 40. I don't have children. And so my trajectory was very different from that of so many of my classmates. And I owe all of that to my mother, who had different expectations for me. I asked her one time, why don't you push me in those directions? She said, when she got married to my father, and she said she ruined her life by doing that, although we ended up in Hawaii. But she said, why should I push you in those kinds of directions? You need to find your way.
And okay, you mentioned your husband and not getting married till later. But one of the things that I loved about reading is like you and your husband laugh together. And like to me, and like you have this relationship, which seems very special. And from what I can read, but just the idea of laughing and the health of that and being in a partnership with somebody that together you can laugh. Obviously,
Yes.
you've had medical issues. You've been being a leader is sometimes just oncoming and hard, but to then have a partner to laugh with, that's pretty good.
Yes, it is. I think that's one of the greatest things about my relationship. We went together in our 20s, and then we broke up, and he got married to someone else, and then he got divorced, and then we got married. We have now been married over 35 years, which is pretty darn amazing.
Yes.
And 18 of those years we have lived in, he's lived in Hawaii and I've lived in DC. It's kind of amazing. And he is retired now, so he can spend more time with me. And we marvel at the fact that 18 of the 35 years that we've been married, we have lived apart, but always supportive. And people really say that he is like the ideal spouse of someone like me.
I love that. And look, I think for people to also understand, being a senator from Hawaii to get to DC is a long trip. You're not somebody that can get on a train and be there in 2 hours. Like, it is a long journey for you.
Yep, it's a long haul. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that we both went to school here, and so that helps. That we had some kind of a connection to Washington D.C. I've practiced law, so I know how hard that is. He was a practicing lawyer for many years, and he was also involved in politics early on. And so we both have an understanding of the lives that the other leads, and to be very supportive. And you're right. I mean, we have very different interests. He's this total World War II buff. He knows so much about World War II. So I often ask him, what about this kind of truck or this kind of tank? And he can tell me, because I sit on the Armed Services Committee, which is pretty interesting considering that I was an anti-war person.
Yes.
And he was in ROTC at the University of Michigan. So you see, life is full of surprises.
Life is full of surprises. Talk a little bit about what your hobbies are, because I understand that I know that you're passionate about art.
Yeah.
But I also read that you also are passionate about, or you're involved in internet Scrabble. Is that still true?
Oh, well, no, not really. No, I love art. And so I've taken a lot of art history courses. I have something like a minor in art history, but that part of my life is really what helps to keep me on an even keel. Because let's face it, things get kind of depressing around here sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to keep myself on an even keel, I've really turned to my artistic expression as one of the things that keeps me on an even keel. And what I do is, I do ceramics. I've made pieces, but I have a tiny apartment in DC. And one of the things that I do is I make paper. I've always been interested in artisanal things, textiles, paper. So I make my own paper, make my own cards. And it flows from my mother making cards for me. She's made thousands of cards for me with pressed flowers that she grew and that she would make. But I make my own paper. So it carries on yet another tradition that was begun by my mother. And it makes me feel that much closer to her. And if you can see I can show you some of the cards that I make. So I'm always looking for leaves and stuff that I can put in my cards. So this is from my autumn collection. I find these leaves and I make the paper.
Beautiful.
So this is what I do. And the ginkgo, here's another one. These are ferns from Hawaii. So I press these and I make these cards. It helps to keep me on an even keel. It takes time to make this, so I send these cards to people that I really like.
I can imagine. I'm looking forward to getting one day. But in the meantime, they are just beautiful. And, I think that again tells people this is who you are. You are an artist. And yet you have this role as an important leader in our country. But I love that you're an artist, and you're the first person that I've met who makes their own cards in such a beautiful way as well. So thank you.
There you go.
So now I'm going to just do what I do as my rapid questions. They could be a one-word answer, but it's kind of get to know Mazie. Okay? And they're pretty easy, but they're fun ones, I hope. What is your favorite sound?
Silence.
I got it. What is your favorite color?
Purple.
Okay, that's mine too.
In that category. Yeah. Lavender, purple.
Yeah. Favorite scent or smell? What is one of your favorites?
I am allergic to a lot of scents. Everything has to be unscented in my house.
Gotcha.
Sad to say.
Yeah. No, it's okay. And who would you say is your biggest cheerleader?
My husband.
And are you a dog or a cat person?
I am a cat person.
Okay. Do you have a cat?
I had one. He lived with us for over 20 years. I still miss him. He's my screensaver.
Oh,
My cat. Yeah. In fact, wait. See? There he is. That is
beautiful.
my cat.
Okay.
So I still miss him. I like dogs too, but I am a cat person.
Okay. Favorite meal. What is your favorite meal if you could pick one thing?
Oh, probably a spam musubi. It's unique to Hawaii. If you ever come to Hawaii, unless you're vegetarian or vegan, you have to have a spam musubi. Hawaii is the spam eating capital of the country, and we're proud of it. I love spam.
Okay. I'm a vegan, so I don't do the spam,
Okay.
but I get it. I get it. And what is your favorite dessert?
Probably ice cream.
Okay. Certain flavor?
A Haagen-Dazs rum raisin, if you can believe it.
Sounds good. Okay. And music. And do you have time for music and that?
I do have a band that I love, and this is going to come as a surprise to some people. I love BTS.
And
That
why?
is a Korean boy band.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't care about any of the other boy bands. I consider BTS to be so unique. They're the only band that was invited to the White House, for example. But I got onto them long before, and I find them so intriguing. But what is the most intriguing thing is that here's this Korean band from a country that, South Korea, and the world knows these people. It's pretty amazing to me at a time when there's so much divisiveness, and we don't acknowledge the sort of the joy that other cultures can bring to us. So I love BTS.
Okay. I love that. It's a great story. And do you have time for exercise? Do you get to work out and do things, or running through the Capitol your exercise?
Sadly, no. Although I try to get to 10,000 steps, but you know what is kind of nice is I can look back to the days when I used to go to the gym, when I used to run 15 miles a week.
Wow.
And I used to do all that, so I know that I could do it. I just don't do that anymore. And
Well, I will
so
tell you, I know that you as a senator, you have a lot of, like you said, a lot of steps in a day.
10,000
are
steps
moving.
would be a goal.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Favorite household chore?
Probably if I had to washing dishes. I don't have a favorite household. Who has a favorite household chore?
You'd be surprised. People do. People have one thing they like or one thing they're good at. I'm just saying. And I found that some people actually say household chores are therapeutic. Some of our leaders.
Well, to me, making my paper and my cards, that's what I call therapeutic.
Yes, exactly. What advice do you give to people? Because you've had a lot of experience. Like, what would be an advice that you would give to young people figuring out like who they want to be? Not the career, but the characters that they should, what they could be as a character to develop their character.
One piece of advice is to know that they can make a difference. And as Martin Luther King Jr. said, we can all be great if we define greatness as making somebody else's life better. So to know that they can make a difference. And the same thing is to take risks, just do things that your friends may not be doing. And because that opens the door for a lot of things. I did a lot of things that my classmates never did. And it's one of the ways that I ended up doing what I do. I'm grateful because I have what I would consider a fulfilling job in life. And a lot of people don't have that, which I think is sad. So I'm grateful that I get to do something that maybe makes a difference.
It does make a difference, first. And my last question, which I ask everybody, and I think you've touched on it, but just to end on this one, what brings you joy, and how, if you are joyful, do you share that joy, and what does it mean to other people?
Well, now that my husband is retired and we have been able to spend more time, I realize that being with my husband really makes me happy, really. And for the 18 years that we lived basically separately, but always supportive, I really like hanging out with my husband. That brings me joy. And then my artsy fartsy stuff that I do.
Yeah, I like that. Well, thank you. First, I want to say that I also read a quote that was something that you've talked about, and I believe it says it's from Lady Murasaki Shikubi, and it's from the Tales of Ganji. And it says, if you are scorched earth, I will be warm rain. And, I didn't know if I was going to talk about it, but there's something about you and your character that is warm rain. You're this resilient person, you're courageous, you're inspiring. And I think that what you offer to people and our country, and again, this isn't political, but just to humans that you represent, and you represent the people of Hawaii and you represent the people of America, but through that humanity, you also are a warm rain. And when I think about a warm rain, I just think about yes, it's wet, but there's a comfort to it. So I don't know. I just wanted to end on that one. For me, having spoken with you and getting to know you, that is who I think you are. And sometimes our earth is scorched and we need warm rain. And thank you for being that.
I think that's a lovely imagery. Thank you. It does keep me going that when people thank me for what I do, because often it feels like there's just so much animosity everywhere and there's too much negativity and hatred in our country. So it helps me when people come up to me and say thank you. Not to stroke myself, but it's a lovely imagery. Thank you. I'll hold that too.
Yeah. So thank you. And I look forward to having coffee in person and being in person with you. But thank you virtually for having coffee with me and for sharing who you are. And I really appreciate it. Hi, it's Liz. Please join me every Tuesday for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Remember to hit subscribe to get an alert when a new episode is live and for exclusive content. Ciao.